welcome to Access Sportsnet Lakers. I'm your host, Allie Clifton. Joining me today, Lakers reporter Mike Trudell and Lakers beat writer for the LA Times, Dan Wakey. It might just be one.
Hi.
Hi.
It's good to be here, guys.
Oh, what a pleasant. Did you see that smile?
I'm so happy.
Stop me in my tracks.
Thank you. It's like, it's weird to see Mike not at a Lakers game somewhere else. It's like when you used to run into one of your teachers at school. It's like they have a life outside of Staples Center. Like, this is nuts.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
what?
I just was going to kick it to you, but then I remember that you're hosting the show, so I'll just sit here.
Well, with that said, I was going to say it's good to see the both of you, and we actually have, though just one game, we have something to talk about, which is kind of nice, but it is also the Lakers. We always have something to talk about, and let's get a little update on the Lakers roster. Heading into Friday's game, here it is. Ellington is out once again with a hamstring injury. THT, Trevor Ariza still out after their respective surgeries. Kendrick Nunn, he's also out. We're on him in a moment, but head coach Frank Vogel gave an update about his status for Friday.
Wayne is still out. Nunn has developed some soreness in his knee when he was, working to return to play from the ankle, and they did some imaging and found a bone bruise they're concerned about. So he's going to be out and likely be reevaluated in 2 or 3 weeks. The great thing is we have depth. If everybody's healthy, we're going to have to make some difficult decisions as to which guys to go to. And it's just brought clarity to those decisions. It's not a situation where we don't believe in the guys that we have. We have the right depth, to still get the job done. We don't feel like that's going to limit us. But there's obviously there's a lot of versatility with the skill sets of Wayne and Talon and Trevor and Monk. I'm sorry, not Monk. Nunn. All these guys that we'll have 82 games to take advantage of. But right now we got the guys in uniform to get the job done.
So on one hand, guys, clarity is a good thing, but you're also receiving that while you're shorthanded because of the injuries. I want to start with Kendrick Nunn. Hearing that news today, reevaluated in 2 to 3 weeks based off of knee soreness that has developed. Your reaction?
Bad news. I mean, like, they are down 40% of their playable rotation at this point. Those 4 players you showed on the screen are guys that were counted on, are going to be counted on to be a part of sort of what they want to do this year. And when you can survive 1 or 2 of those rotational injuries and move things around, this is a little trickier. And I think you saw some kind of in that opener, some weird groupings and stuff like that. And these were things that could maybe be mitigated by a Kendrick Nunn being back and having him having him off the court for the next 2 to 3 weeks minimum. The Lakers lose, I think, one of their better perimeter defenders. They lose another shot creator, another playmaker a little bit, and just a guy that I think would give them more clarity as to who they are.
Yeah, I think it's a big deal because it's a bone bruise, as Vogel said, and they're going to reevaluate in 2 to 3 weeks, which doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be able to play right away. And to me, he was probably the guy that was going to play about the 5th most minutes on the team. So right after the 3 stars, and then Bazemore, I think, has separated himself for his defense specifically, Allie. But to not have Nunn there and the optionality he gives you on the wing and also as a defensive player, where I think he's a little better than people realize. He'll battle over screens. He's pretty tough. So those things I think will be an issue. And now Vogel has to once again go back to where they were last season, where it's, okay, who's 11th on the roster, who's the 12th guy, who's 13th, and sort of plug those guys into minutes when they already don't have the type of cohesion that a lot of teams have, including the Phoenix Suns, who they, of course, play tomorrow.
That's a really good point, I think, because it's another player you have to reintegrate, right? This isn't just a big guy. Like, this is a guy who, when he's on the court and doing what he's supposed to do, he's going to have the ball in his hands, right? So they're already dealing with that with Russell Westbrook. Maybe in 2 to 3 weeks, I'm sure they hope that's a little more ironed out. But let's now throw another problem into the mix. And then, what do our lineups look like when Taylor Horton-Tucker, another ball handler, and another playmaker comes back? These are all kind of confusing things. And this is going to be the story of this team early in the year is, how do they handle all this stuff? Luckily for them, they've got great top-end talent. And so a lot of nights, I think, sort of the formula is going to be to sort of win ugly in a way where you've got great players, you can out-talent a lot of teams, do it that way, and this cohesion and kind of the self-knowledge as to who they are as a team. We might not see that till January. That could be a ways down the road.
Which the beautiful thing about this, guys, and we all know this, is one, the team has been preaching patience for other reasons. You never want to obviously start the season with injuries, but that kind of plays part into what they've been preaching. But also you don't want to peak on night 2 game 2, if you will. So there is time. With that said, the positive is that your stars are healthy. So outside of them, who is it, Mike, that you want to see step up? Who needs to step up when you're dealing with these injuries and who they are too early in the season?
With this specific one to none, I do think about Bradley just because of the defensive presence that you're going to need. That's where the Lakers lost a lot on the perimeter in the offseason. Think about Caruso and KCP and Kuzma, even Markieff Morris to an extent. All of those guys you could trust as two-way players. So I think that Frank Vogel does trust Avery Bradley, and we saw that as he put him in the fourth quarter. So that's one guy. Dan and I were just talking a moment ago. Austin Reeves, I thought, played really well in the preseason, and he's the kind of guy that he's a little bit better defensively than you think. He's really smart about angles and when to dig down and when to help in the proper rotation. So that's something that I think is important as well. But Dan alluded to this a second ago, Allie. I think the bigger thing is LeBron and AD can win games to an extent on their own. Integrating Russ, to me, remains a more difficult challenge than which role player steps in to shoot threes, to play defense, to play hard on that end. Like, they'll get guys to come in to do that. I think that it's those two that are going to have to figure out Russ as the bigger early season issue.
And that's the plus here, is that those three, when you talk about figuring it out, are healthy.
They're out there right now. And the tricky part is you don't want this stuff to bleed over into, we need more now from Carmelo Anthony. We need more from our older players. Like, that's the really unlucky part about this, is like, we knew injuries were going to be a factor this year. I think people thought it'd be the older players, though, right? It wouldn't be, 20-year-old Talen Horton-Tucker. Kendrick Nunn's, 26 or something like that, right? Like, we didn't think it would be those guys. So I totally agree. Avery Bradley, huge guy. Getting Wayne Ellington back will help, too. And they're close on that, supposedly. That's what Frank has told us. Now, look, he'll have to get into a rhythm. He was not in one during the preseason. He struggled a little bit, but that's a shooter, not known as a defender, but a guy who's got a lot of experience in this league. I think having him back will help and give them a little stability on the wing right now, but they're really shorthanded.
And good point there. There was positivity on Wayne's front that he is getting closer.
Well, the hamstring's in the back, Allie, but yes.
There was talks of growing pains for the Lakers with the addition, I love you, of Russell Westbrook. And we saw that firsthand in Tuesday's opener. Westbrook scored 8 points, going 4 for 13 from the field, 5 boards and 4 assists. He also had 4 turnovers and was a minus 23 on the floor. After Tuesday's loss, AD had some words of encouragement for his newest teammate.
Doing what's best for the team is being himself. Like, we know what comes with Russell Westbrook. He's going to push the ball. He's going to be tenacious on the defensive end. He's going to get in the paint. He's going to find guys. And, it's our job to continue to encourage him to be himself. And don't look for the pass all the time. I kind of had that my first year, like, with LB. Like, okay, I don't want to shoot the ball too much, but you got good looks. And, you got to take some shots and be aggressive. We'd rather you be aggressive than, be a little timid and not aggressive. So, it's a learning, experience for sure, playing with me and LB. The good thing is, like, we all play different positions. So the ball's going to be in his hands. We got to get him comfortable in more pick and rolls and get him in some more post-ups, when the smaller guys are guarding him. And let him get downhill where he's best. Russ is very hard on himself. And I told him today, I said, I think I'm 0-3 in my Lakers season openers. So, it's game 1. And the same way he's feeling right now, the same way I was feeling in my first year here. I had a little reassurance from LB, and we were fine. So, we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. He'll figure it out. But, we'll figure it out together as a team on the defensive end for sure.
I told Russ to go home and watch a comedy. Do something that can put a smile on his face. So hard on himself. I told him, don't be so hard on yourself. It's one game. I understand that the competitors, we're all competitors, and we all feel like when we don't play well or play to our ability. So I completely understand that as well. So, but I just don't want him to be so hard on himself. That was the one thing that I hopefully get through him or to him. Don't be so hard on himself. And like I said, he can go home, he's going to see 3 babies that he has. They might be asleep, but they will put a smile on his face. And he got a beautiful wife, family. So at the end of the day, you go home and then you really like, okay, all right, it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. So, but we do look forward to, getting back in the film, getting back on the floor on Thursday, seeing ways we can get better as a team, as individuals, and then getting back on the floor on Friday versus another tough test, another tough team in Phoenix. So.
Yeah, him more than anybody, it's going to be an adjustment period, right? He's coming into our culture, our system. He's the new guy, and he's got to find his way, and it's difficult when you're used to being, the guy that has the ball most of the nights to be able to, play off of others like Bron and AD. So it's just a little bit different for him. He's going to be great for us, but it's going to be an adjustment period.
Two things, guys, I love when it comes to the three of them that I think we've seen from day one. The trust, the respect for one another is there, but also the understanding of what it's going to take to come together. I loved hearing AD say that it was not easy for me to learn how to play alongside LeBron James initially, and that understanding is there. But also the fact that we heard today, Dan, that Russ was back to being himself. How much of this is just a turn the page, let's move on? Well,
it has to be, because dwelling on it isn't going to do any good, right? I think a lot of what we're going to see from Russell Westbrook early in the season are going to be sort of sins of omission. I think he is afraid to step on toes at this point. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to play off of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, great players. But that's not really Russell Westbrook's game. It's never been a play off of other people game. Like, it is a slap a brick to the gas pedal and go as crazy forwards as fast as possible and take everybody else with you. Now, it doesn't make a ton of sense to say, here you go, Russell Westbrook. This is your team. We're all going to get out of the way. They have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So they need to kind of find a little bit of a middle ground in that. And that's going to be the challenge. And I think it's going to give us some sort of awkward growing pains like it did in game one.
So you think about the big threes of the past even 10 years, right? And almost always, at least one of the guys either was a shooter or had to relent into being one. Like Chris Bosh, it didn't work great right away, then they just had him space out. You, of course, were in Cleveland, Ali, so you know that both Kyrie and Kevin Love, perfectly comfortable off the ball as spacers. LeBron could drive. Kyrie could do that too. Golden State, totally different circumstance, but Durant, Steph, and Clay, right, all shooters. So LeBron, Westbrook, and AD, shooting is not the #1 skill of either or any of those three guys. And what we saw in the first game was that LeBron and AD combined for 49 field goal attempts. Most of them were jumpers. LeBron took 17 jump shots. So if that's already happening, the paint is clogged. And then Russ, that's not really a system into which Russ can have success with what his current skill set is. That's, I think, what they've acknowledged in saying that it's going to take time to realize what the best lineups are around them and then how they're going to be able to get to the spots that they want to. And it's not that much of a surprise the way that game one went.
The trick is going to be defensively. And it's a weird thing when you talk about offensive fit to say defense is going to be the key here, but it's going to be about getting into transition. Their half-court offense is going to be challenged for the reasons Mike mentioned, that you don't have a ton of floor spacing, particularly if you add a traditional big to that, who gives you a little bit of a lob threat, but still at the same time doesn't really give you much stretch. I think it's going to be about getting stops and getting into transition, which brings us all the way back to the start of the show, where this is a team that doesn't have Alex Caruso anymore. It doesn't have KCP. They're going to have to do it, I think, mostly with team defense, which, again, also takes time and continuity to kind of figure that part out. And so, I think, look, they're lucky they are at home a ton early in this season. They are going to see some really good teams. They're going to see a really good team on Friday. But I think they do have a little bit of a runway here to kind of figure those things out defensively. And I think if they can get stops, force turnovers, get out and run. We saw that one possession at the top of the show where, they get a stop, the ball gets out to Bazemore, he flips it back to LeBron, and they get a dunk in transition. Like, they have that kind of skill, and they can do that, I think, a lot. Against the Warriors, it happened like twice, right? So it's going to have to be more on the defensive end, and I think that'll open up things for Russell Westbrook, get him more in rhythm, more comfortable in transition, because in the half court, they're playing in a shoebox.
How long do you think it'll take Russ to be Russ?
I mean, a couple months. It has the last 2 years. Like, if you look at his stint in Washington, if you look at his stint in Houston, and he especially noted that preseason is not his best time. But there's a reason why, Ali, it takes a little bit of time for Russ to adjust, because he's a totally unique player. Yep. He's a completely original offensive player, where some of what Dan was mentioning earlier, where he puts the brick on the gas pedal and explodes to the rim. Well, that, especially if you're playing with some other stars, it just requires time to figure out. So it's happened for a reason, and that's why they've all been telling us that it was going to happen. But if they do, like, Russ wasn't the only reason that they lost that first game.
Oh, no.
If they don't foul Steph a couple of times at the end of quarters, and if they make some free throws, then they're probably in pretty good shape, right?
Yep.
So that's because LeBron and AD are great enough to be able to win games while they're integrating Russ.
Better on defense, too. Yep. I mean, struggled on defense.
Struggled in the first half.
Yeah, struggled late in the possessions in the second half, I think. Let Jordan Poole get loose. Like, to me, those are things that are going to help. Now, this is like, but this team is built to score, too. Like, that's the other sort of part of this is like, that was sort of the offseason trend was like, let's get more offensive talent in here at the sake of losing some defensive players. And I think that's, it's an interesting challenge for Frank Vogel here early in the season to kind of get these guys going. Because that, like Mike said, I mean, that's about as good a shooting as you can count on from like LeBron and AD. Like they were on and it wasn't enough. And I think that should be a little concerning, but I think Russell Westbrook will be better than he was in game one. That can't be him every game.
Absolutely. I agree. Straight ahead on Access Sportsnet, Lakers, LeBron, Shaq, and Kobe all got named to the NBA Sevens in a Sunday night game at home against the Grizzlies. Lakers follow that up with back-to-back games on the road against the Spurs and Thunder on the 26th and 27th. Then at home against Cleveland on Friday, the 29th. One man who was ready for the return of Lakers basketball was Anthony Davis, who spoke about getting back on the court.
I think last season kind of made me realize that I want to play. I love to play the game. And, you know, not being able to play for a significant part of the season was just very frustrating. And so now, you know, being out there, you know, wanting to play the preseason games and obviously game one, you know, just have that energy, that sense of urgency and all the things that you need to be successful. The game of basketball is fun. You know, the guys that we have on the team, you know, they're fun to play with, cool to be around, which makes that a lot easier to go out there. You know, and then when you got, you know, Russell Westbrook out there and just constantly running around and you know, being a loose cannon out there running around, you kind of just match that energy. And you got guys who can push you. You know, Doe. You know, Dwight, DJ, Bron, Melo, all these guys always push me to be better and better. And so that kind of brings you more juice. So, but I think a lot of it comes from just not being able to play as much as I wanted to last year. If I go out there and do what I'm supposed to do, you know, hopefully it comes, but it's not something that I go out there in every game like, okay, you need to go win MVP this game, you know, and this game needs to be a significant game or crazy game, go get 50 and stuff like that. I just play within the game and let the game come to me. And, you know, by the end of the year, if that's enough to, you know, win an individual award, then, you know, I'll be glad.
I think it's safe to say, guys, that it really looks good to see AD play like Anthony Davis. From the start of the game, through the way he moved, his mid-range game, it was as if he was just reading and reacting. What'd you think of game one for AD?
I mean, I think the first thing is when we sit there and listen to him talk, do you see his layered situation going on, Allie?
I actually did notice that today.
The T-shirt, cut-off hoodie, and then the practice jersey.
He actually brought it today. You got a sense of that. You were like, okay, can I ask my question?
Well,
AD is in full force right now.
He was in a chatty mood. He wanted to talk about my hat, and then I introduced the Green Bay Packers into the conversation. But yeah.
And then
so sorry to cut you off, but yeah, all the layers.
Thanks for doing that, by the way, as a Bears fan. No, but yeah, I mean, getting him in rhythm. This is why he played as much as he played in the preseason. Was all about getting into a rhythm, getting off to a better start. I'll say this, in the eyes of some people around the league, he lost a little luster last year. Did not come into camp in particularly great shape because of the compressed offseason. Even when before the injury, hadn't really played all that well, at least certainly not to his standard. Showed flashes of it early in that series against Phoenix that he could be dominant again, right at the end of last season, but it was never really like a full AD experience. Didn't dominate on both sides of the ball the way he can. I mean, this is a really promising sign that he can be kind of the MVP candidate we all thought he was last year. If he can get to that level, that'll help kind of ease all these other issues.
And speaking of that, Mike, I want to ask you, because I thought it was a very intriguing answer from him when asked about, you know, those goals of whether it be Defensive Player of the Year or winning MVP. And he said, I don't go out to be MVP every night. It's rather just do my job and allow that to speak for itself when it matters most at the end of the season. Because I think if you get that side of Anthony Davis, an MVP kind of player, then everything else falls in line in terms of the success of this team.
Yeah, so to me, that should just be the every night expectation, and that shouldn't have changed. Last year was in context that Dan mentioned. I've been referring to it as the bubble tax, and it bit almost every player that went that far into the bubble, except for LeBron, up until the point where Solomon Hill dove into his leg and hurt his ankle. He somehow, because he's LeBron, managed to just be great early in that season to carry it. But most guys, it affected. All of the Lakers that were on that team suffered at least one type of an injury and then hit the wall mentally at a certain point. So nothing has changed with AD's talent. He's great on both sides of the court. He can do everything. He's got the right mentality now. So I was expecting him to return right back to that form, and he has. So now it's just going to be about what that fit is once again. But AD's game, to me, at this point, should be beyond question. That doesn't mean that he's got that same, like, Russell Westbrook, show up to the arena, crazy intensity every time. But he's got a base level, Allie, and that's, like, he's got the all-NBA first-team type talent.
And that AD game is very smooth. Still to come, the NBA 75 list has been released in full. How many Lakers